All right, we'll get this conference call started. My name is Zach Smith. I'm the product and training specialist at Growers and usually the host of these conference calls. Welcome to our October call. In the past, the October call was normally reserved for the office staff to come on and give updates. We did that last month, and so we're going to be doing something different this month. Our featured speaker is going to be Keith Shutt, who is a district manager for us in North Dakota. And he also runs a lime spreading business. And then one of his salesmen, Tyler, is also going to be on. I'm not sure. I don't see his name, but we'll figure that out. I think as we usually do, we'll start with Jim Hallbeisen. Jim, if you've got anything to say, go ahead, and then I'll get back on.
Okay, Zach, you got me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, very good. Yeah, what I'm usually doing on the conference calls, guys, is Zach wants me to talk a little bit about current events. One thing I'm going to add a little bit to this year is to talk a little bit about our solution publication. That comes out about 5 times a year, and the 4 that come out from early fall through spring match up with our conference calls. So I was going to talk about those a little bit to give some guys some ideas of some of the things we're doing in the solution. Then we'll get into the more of the current event things. The early fall one has gone out about a month ago, and it's kind of interesting. I suggested to Zach that we use the September picture out of the 2023 calendar, which is a tour we had up in Keith Shutt's area. And Keith is also featured in the early fall edition of the Grower Solution. And one of the things that we talk a lot about with Keith is he has a lime spreading business. Keith and I had a little conversation today, and he said he's up to 63,000 tons they have spread already up there, and he said he's got another 25,000 to go. So it's kind of interesting when you're working with someone that's spreading limestone on soils that may be up in the low 8s, and the establishment says that that doesn't work. And what we're finding out is that this pH adjustment, and that's the sole use of high calcium limestone, is just not, that's not the correct information. And so that's something we will continue to talk about. But the article does a very nice job of discussing Keith's business and some of the things Keith has implemented up in North Dakota to try to give customers and potential customers some idea of how to use high calcium lime and its place in their agricultural programs. Within the solution, there's just a couple other articles I want to talk a little bit about. Number one, we have a short article on guys doing test plots on their own farm. This is something the Growers program has talked about from day one. Anything you implement on your farm, you need to do some test plot work to see what the return on investment is, gentlemen. And that's becoming more of an issue in the agricultural network. Just accepting what the universities are saying or what the big companies are saying, farmers are seeing that they have to evaluate these economically. One article that I wrote on banding dry fertilizer when I was at South Dakota State University back in the 70s, they were trying to convince, the co-ops were trying to convince farmers to get away from banding fertilizer because it slowed them down in planting. What they wanted the farmers to do is hire the co-op bulk spread fertilizer and then plant as fast as you can plant. And what we're seeing is an evolution of where the institutions are saying, and the rest of the society is saying, we just environmentally can't live with this. And then when fertilizer prices got very high, that too demonstrated that the bulk spreading is just so inefficient that the cost factor and the loss factor are very, very high. And then another article that was interjected in that is talking about the soil test, the microbiometer. And in this particular article, which we worked with Dr. Fitzpatrick on, she's comparing it to other types of microbiological testing. And really, it's called the chemical fumigation of soil to rupture the microbes and then measure the carbon from those microbes to determine how much actual live biology you have in your soil is considered the gold standard. The only problem, it's $500 a pop. So what she did was compare the microbiometer to this particular test and found it correlated or was very representative of that particular test. And the article goes into the science and the statistics of that for those of you that like to look at that type of thing. And see, again, those are just some of the articles besides the one discussing Lyme in detail. Kind of interesting, Keith has a test where you use a bucket of soil, you put so much lime into it, and then start planting seeds and see how the seeds react to the calcium placement. And this thing is kind of interesting. It's just a crude test that gives you an idea where to start when you're applying high calcium limestone. So when we get into more current events, guys, U.S. government came out with their monthly WASAID report today, stocks in all positions, and they lowered the corn and soybean volumes. They whittled a little bit on the yields, but not much. And we had a real nice run on corn, up a dime, and then soybeans were up 40 today. But the only underlying factor is that soybean meal took a $15 a ton jack today for you guys that feed. And part of that is the problems in Argentina with the very dry weather. Their soybean production is down dramatically, and they're the largest exporter of soybean meal in the world. Without any soybeans, that's going to be kind of tough for them to be competitive. And so the U.S. is going to end up being one of the major suppliers because we got the infrastructure to do it. We're way ahead of Brazil on that, even though they're producing more beans. Our ability to process meal and oil, particularly biodiesel, is going to put us at a real competitive advantage there. So as Argentina struggles, and right now they're saying that Brazil is heading into some drier weather. They've got a certain amount of their beans and corn planted at this point, and it looks like weather may be an issue here. And see, they've been saying that they're going to have a phenomenal yield again this year. Well, we'll have to see how the weather basically cooperates with that. Another small factor that you guys might be interested in, there was on the agricultural dive this week, they're talking about in the farmers that are using Colorado River to irrigate. And right now there is such a demand on that water going into Arizona and Southern California that the states are considering economic incentives to farmers to put their ground in fallow and not use their water allotment. And the example that was in the dive was pretty interesting. A big lemon grove that's got 1,000 acres, considering 500 acres going into fallow, and the yearly payment on that would be 1.4 million. So again, that worked out to about $2,000 an acre. And see, we see this demand outside of agriculture for water in those dry areas. And see, that could have a certain effect on overall agricultural production that could bring some of these prices back fairly significantly, guys. So we're just going to have to keep an eye on that. There was another article that appeared in the Morning Ag Clips out of New York, where there was research that's being done in Austria. And these educational institutions are looking for money when they're doing research on climate change. And what these guys were doing is trying to stimulate the type of climate that we're supposedly going to have in the next 15 to 20 years, which is supposedly going to be significantly drier, significantly warmer, and will have a very serious effect on food production. Well, these guys tried to mimic that and look at what was happening as far as production is concerned. And what they found was they approached it from the biological side, looking at the microbes feeding the plant and what their ability was to adapt to this type of changing climate. And what they found was that the microbes that are very successful at working with the plant in dry conditions, less rainfall, higher temperatures, those populations start to dominate, and the reduction in production was not as great as everybody's been talking about. And see, this makes a lot of sense to me, because when you start implementing the growers program, you get the high calcium lime on, and then you create that environment that gets the proper microbes to feed the crop, and then you don't offend that with the fertility that you're using. That would be basically the same. We've known for years that the program has been able to sustain guys in drier environments. Guys are pretty amazed at what they get with as little rainfall or higher temperatures that they're getting. And I think, again, that implementation of that calcium, getting that 8-to-1 ratio on the CEC guys, allows the microbes that can sustain themselves in a less water-filled environment or less rainfall environment. And so that what they're saying basically gives credence to the growers program. And next month, I'll just talk a little bit about it from the fertilizer side. But we had a guy in Indiana always used to say, well, heavy rainfall, the most salt fertilizer is going to win. And he said, when you start getting into these drier conditions, that's when growers becomes very competitive against the salt-filled environment. And see, calcium is a big key with that, guys. Getting that air in there, feeding that calcium to those microbes. And this research is giving quite a bit of substantiation to that. So we'll be talking more about that. There will be some articles that'll come down the road where we talk about that. Just a couple of other things. There was an article that appeared on the microbiometer website where in England, the John Deere company is basically doing work with trying to decide different cultural practices, particularly like cover crops, if they're building microbiology biomass in the soil. And those people in England and the research companies they're working with, they are actually using the microbiometer to do that. And they believe that it's giving them very good results. So again, we think as a company, we'll continue to work with that microbiometer and see whether, the growers program is giving us the type of microbiological biomass buildup that we're looking for. And as more people are talking about compost teas, again, we think the microbiometer would be really the best way to measure this economically. You can go back to the more expensive methods that require the lab, but again, using the microbiometer is much lower cost and much easier access with it. So the only other thing, guys, is anhydrous has kind of turned around. That happened about a month ago. And eventually, I would think this is going to have some effect on 28, 32. Even MAP and DAP might be affected by that. We saw, a little bit of regression with phosphorus, not a lot. Potassium, more regression, and then anhydrous was the one that went down the most. But now it's seeming to have reached the bottom and turning around. I think you probably would see a little bit of spike in natural gas, with the war going on in Israel. So again, that natural gas factor is definitely going to affect nitrogen. Just the release of nitrogen out of that area of the world is relatively small, right in the Gaza area or in Israel. They do ship a certain amount of potassium, but it's very, very small. I would think the spreading of the war into the other oil regions would have more of an effect on what nitrogen may do. And, that's the scuttlebutt as I talk with guys, around our service area. Should they be pulling the trigger on nitrogen? Is it going to stay stable? That's anybody's guess at this point. Some guys have already made the commitment because it's come down significantly with that drop in the anhydrous price. So again, we'll keep you apprised of that, what guys are seeing in different areas, and so you can make a educated decision and see how it matches up with what these crop prices are doing. If anybody's got any questions on any of that, before I turn it back to Zach, you're more than welcome. You can *6, or you can raise your hand, if you're on an iPad or on the computer, and Zach can see that stuff and kind of respond to it. Well, it's a pretty quiet group tonight, Zachy.
Yeah, it seems that way. I wanted to make a comment when with regard to you talking about the microbes kind of adapting and to the potentially warmer temperatures and less rainfall, and how the growers program kind of works into that. So some of you might know I have an environmental background, and one of the, I'll say, few ways that I've found that helpful is in kind of thinking about systems and how they're all connected, and many are living, like we've talked about the soil being a living system. But we have a term for what Jim was describing, where a system has the ability to withstand and come back from disturbances, and it's called resiliency. And so it's just interesting that that's a term that is usually applied to forest ecosystems and water ecosystems and stuff like that, but it works in the soil too, where if you can build a resilient system, even if conditions change, perhaps permanently, doesn't mean the system is going to fall apart and be unable to sustain life. If you have a healthy system with many working components that's not oversimplified, then it can withstand those disturbances, and it might change, but it's not going to be destroyed. And so there's another concept there that we've talked about before, which is called novel ecosystems, and basically the idea that just because an ecosystem has been a certain way doesn't mean that it always will be that way. And also that there are probably new ecosystems or systems in general developing that we don't really know anything about, and we can't use old parameters to judge them by, because there's new pressures on them that are forming them in a different way than we're used to. And so I think we're probably going to see that in the soil too, and we are seeing it in the soil. And I think the growers program, with its emphasis on soil health, can build that resiliency into it. So before we move on to Keith, Chris Coles wanted to jump in. He's our sales manager, and talk a little bit about pricing and sales discount periods. Chris, I don't know, I couldn't find your number, so if you can unmute yourself, that'd be grand.
Can you hear me, Zach?
There you are.
Can you hear me, Zach?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I had to do it the old-fashioned way. The internet wasn't working here, so I'm on the phone. So hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, just wanted to announce our new price went into effect October 1st. It's a 13% decrease from last year. Also, remember that includes free delivery, and I like to say our consulting services too. Our network's pretty special, guys, and make sure that's included when you talk price and everything else with growers, that you include those extra benefits, because I'll tell you, our competitors charge for freight in a lot of circumstances, and then there's even add-ons for other stuff. So, we ran into a deal this week where a nutrient guy came out, sold his product, and, he he's going to have add-ons after the year starts because he didn't have micronutrients and various other stuff. So just make sure you let him know what, the Full Growers program is all about. We also have our cast in advance discount that started October 1st with 10%. That's good through December 5th. Just make sure, guys, that everything's postmarked by December 5th. And that's on a Tuesday, so that gives you through that weekend right before the end, that December 5th date. So just make sure everything's in the mail and postmarked by December 5th for that 10% discount. Then after that, it gradually goes down to 8%, 6%, and 4% through the end of February. So we also have other discounts available. We have a 5% cash discount available, 5% tank load, which is 4,000 gallons, single delivery discount. We have a 7% 2-tanker load discount, single delivery. We also have a pickup discount and a local delivery discount. Just wanted to let everybody know we finished up our farm tours last week in New York and New Jersey. I was with Zach and John Sesnick. Went all over the country this year on, farm tours and seeing a lot of fields. And what I really did see, I just want to touch real quick, is the resilience of growers, guys, out there. When they had high temperatures, they had wet weather, they had spotty weather, they had dry weather, they had hail. And I really saw some crops make it through some of those tough times and really, perform under stressful situations. So always keep that in mind. Next week's the Sunbelt Expo down in Moultrie, Georgia. I'll be down there with Daniel Weaver and the guys. That's October 16th through the 19th. So if you're in that area, stop by. With that, that's about all I have right now, Zach. So I just wanted to give a quick update on sales. So
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Are there any questions for Chris? All right. Then we'll move into the main portion of the call. So we'll have a period for questions at some point, although you guys do seem quiet. But Keith Shutt, I saw your name in here. Where have you gone? There you are. Hey, Keith, can you speak up?
You hear me, Zach?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Welcome, Keith.
Okay.
Look, I've given you a brief intro already. You can kind of introduce yourself a bit more if you want, but I thought it'd be good to talk about your lime spreading business and the unique challenges that has doing it in North Dakota and around that area with their high pH soils. And is Tyler on? Do you know, Keith? I'm not sure what number to look for.
Yeah. Star, yeah, I'm on here. 6 to unmute yourself. Okay.
Hey, Tyler.
Yep.
Welcome.
Hey. Thank you.
Yeah, so Tyler, I don't really know you, so I'll let you and Keith introduce you.
Yeah, go ahead, Keith, I guess. Okay, Tyler Cameron, he's a farmer just west of the big city of Crystal, North Dakota. And I made Tyler a salesman here a year ago, and as I'm the district manager in North Dakota here. And Tyler farms, and he's one of those guys that likes to think outside the box. So he's a pretty unique guy and pretty interesting stuff he's doing on his farm. So as far as the lime spreading goes, this is my 12th year. Every year it gets a little bit busier up here in North Dakota and northern Minnesota. The biggest challenge we have in the area is the high pH, and there's still guys that think that because their pH is so high that if they put any calcium in the soil that it's just going to drive the pH rate off the scale. And every year it gets a little bit better, but I still run into guys every month that they talk about that, and the other thing they talk about is you're going to tie up all the micronutrients in the ground, and in a few years nothing's going to grow, and it's just kind of ironic that people are still saying that when I have customers that spread several thousand acres a year in their operation. And I was visiting with Jim a little bit today on the phone, and like I told Jim, I said, it used to be that when I started out, I would spread an 80 or maybe 150 acres for a guy, and that was all you did for him for that year. And, you know, like I told Jim today, I said most of my guys now are doing 300 acres or more a year. I mean, I have guys that do 800 acres a year. I got guys that'll do 1,000 acres every year on their farm. And then I also have guys that'll do 3,000 or 4,000 acres on their farm every year. So and I once again today I remind myself that everybody should be in the lime spreading business, because when the wheels fall off the bus, it's just a bad day, and the wheels literally fell off the bus today. I had one spreader ended up with 2 flat tires, and a few hours later, I had a lime spreader box loaded with 20 ton of lime, and he drove over to start spreading, and then nothing come out of the back of the box, and he drove back to the pile, and he's like, "Yeah, I think something's wrong." And I said, "Yeah, obviously." And I got out and looked underneath, and yeah, there was the apron chain completely wrapped up in the back of the box. And I said, "Well, okay, we'll dig some of this out with the excavator, and then we'll head 35 miles south to the shop, and we'll start cutting with the torch." So with 3 machines in the field, things go really good. And when you get down to 1 machine in the field, you just go to the shop and start fixing. So that's how we spent the rest of our day today. So yeah, some days it's really fun to be in the lime spreading business, and some days you just shake your head and go, "What am I doing?" But
So Keith, how did you get into it?
it's a, you know, I probably about 1999, I decided that I needed to do something for the wintertime, because farming back then, you know, wheat I think was about $3.74 a bushel if you were really good at marketing, and corn was $1.80 a bushel, and soybeans were about $4.60 probably. So I got done farming one year, and I looked at my checkbook and said, "Wow, after I paid the banker, I better find something to do." So I started hauling sugar beets with Trans Systems, and dumping a load of beets one night, and here's this big pile of powder in the lot, and I was like, "What the heck is that?" So I actually asked somebody at the factory, and they said, "Well, that's just waste material." And I said, "Well, what is it?" And they said, "Well, it's lime, and there's some fertilizer in there." So I took a sample and had it sent off to a lab, just because I was curious to see what it really was. And when the test results come back, I was quite shocked. And I thought to myself, boy, this heavy black ground in the valley do a lot of good for the area. So, of course, you know, nothing become of it. I talked to a couple guys, and everybody, of course, thought I was absolutely off my rocker. I talked to an agronomist, and he's like, "Keith, this is calcareous soil in the valley. You can't be spreading lime out here." And nobody thought it was a great idea. So anyway, years later, I ended up working on a large operation, and it was a father and 2 sons. And I made a comment to the dad one day. I said, "You know, you guys grow a lot of sugar beets," and I said, "They have all this byproduct," and I said, "It would be great if you would be putting that on your field." And he's like, "Well, what's it going to do?" And I said, "Well, it's going to, you know, give you soil tilt. It's going to open up this heavy black gumbo ground and get some more oxygen in there. And I said, it's going to make the plant healthier." And I said, and I said, when you put all those things together, I said, obviously it's going to increase your yield and the quality of your crop. And he kind of chuckled, and he's like, "Well, maybe we should try it." And he's like, "So how much do I got to spread? Like 400 or 500 pounds of the acre?" And I just laughed at him, and I said, "Well, it's going to take a lot more than that in this ground," I said, "from my experience in life." But it took several years before they actually finally decided that they would actually give it a real test. So the first test, I believe it was about 8 ton is what they put on, and they stripped the whole quarter. So they did 40 acres, skipped 40, did 40, skipped 40. They spread it, worked it in, planted sugar beets in it. And that was the first year that they actually put scales on all their beet harvesters. So that was hooked into a little iPad computer in the tractor. So it actually printed out basically a yield map on tons per acre. And so at the end of the season, they got done, they took all the information and compiled it together and printed one map for the field. But same token, they printed cards out because in sugar beet production, you get paid on sugar as well as tons. And they sampled every other load off of each one of those strips. So no lime was like a blue card and lime was a pink card. And it was pretty interesting because within about 5 days of that field being completely harvested, they had the results back from Crystal Sugar from the test. And they were pretty shocked at the numbers. So, of course, when harvest was over that year, they invested in a big pull type spreader and an excavator and 3 live bottom trailers to haul lime. And I continued on there for 2 more years with them. And then I decided that I was going to break away and just do this full time and buy equipment and go out on my own. And at the end of the season, everything was done. The year was done, and they knew I was going to leave the farm. The father asked me, he said, "Well, Keith," he said, "what are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm buying a lime spreader, and I'm going to go into the lime spreading business." And he started laughing. He goes, "Keith," he goes, "you're never going to get anybody to do that. You're going to starve to death." He's like, "So when that doesn't work out, you got a job at the farm. Just come back to the farm." And I told him thank you. And I said, "Well," I said, I hope that you're wrong. I said, "I hope this works." But like I told Jim, I said, there are a lot of days I woke up in the morning and I asked myself just what the heck I was doing, because most guys would have given up a long time ago. But I said, like anything worth doing isn't going to be easy. So I somehow managed to stick with it, and it's getting a little bit better every year. I tell Jim all the time I'm an overnight success almost. So I think maybe in 20 more years, if I live that long, I'll maybe be able to say that with a straight face, maybe. So, but anyway, I'll let Tyler talk a little bit about what he's seen on his farm since we started spreading lime. I think probably 3 years ago now, or
yeah, I think
3.5,
like
whatever
yeah.
it's been.
Yep.
I'll let Tyler talk for a while
Time
here.
flies. Well, I guess I'll just kind of tell you how I got into the lime deal here. I guess our initial problem, I guess, was we had a couple of fields that we were fighting with low pH on, I guess, is what got me, interested in inquiring about the lime. So I got a hold of Keith, and he came up and spread some lime for us on our low pH ground, trying to correct that issue, and just got visiting with him and kind of talked about, what he just mentioned with, we have a lot of really wet, heavy gumbo ground, and how this lime would benefit that ground. And so we actually ended up doing some more that spring just to try it on that heavier ground, and we were real pleased, obviously, with the results, and then started doing the growers program, and I've kind of on a mission, I guess, to set out to find kind of how little fertilizer it actually takes to make a crop here. One of my goals in my operation, I guess, and we're doing some different things with nutrient management, and I'm doing some intercropping with soybeans and canola. Is kind of one of my experiments, I guess, that a lot of people are kind of raise their eyebrows about. And who's laughing in the background? Is that Jim?
Yeah,
Jim.
that's me.
So we're the jury's still out this year. We're gonna try and harvest that tomorrow. So we'll see how that works. And for guys that are wondering what's going on with that, canola takes a lot of nitrogen to make a crop. A lot of times we need 120, 130, 140 pounds of nitrogen on our canola. So what we decided to do was we're seeding half a rate of canola and half a rate of soybeans together in the same row. And the idea is to get the soybeans to fix enough nitrogen to feed the canola. And we were real happy with our results last year. Your yield, obviously isn't top end. It definitely yields less, but the economics work out on it, just on not spending that money on fertilizer and and just kind of starting to realize what all this fertilizer is doing to our soil. And I think it's going to benefit the soil in the long run.
So, hey, Tyler, tell these guys, how are you harvesting? How are you separating them?
Yeah, so
When
I should mention that. So we harvest them together. We flex off the soybeans and the canola with our flex header and harvest it all together. So we have a mix of soybeans and canola that ends up in the truck. And then I bought just a little quick clean grain cleaner, and we just run it over that cleaner, and it spits soybeans out one side and canola out the other, and then we just haul it to town separately, and it's pretty slick deal.
So what do you
Tyler, maybe
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Jim.
No, what's your opinion? How are the beans? I mean, how much nitrogen are you whittling out of the diets, you think? I mean, did you do any nitrogen at all for the canola, or did you just pretty well rely totally on the beans?
No, totally on the beans. I have one field this year that we put some AMS on, because canola takes some sulfur, and that field had a history of canola on it, so our sulfur was down a little bit. So I did do one field with some AMS last spring. So that's, we'll have kind of a trial there to see if that's gonna be a difference in yield on the canola.
So when you started putting the lime on this gumbo ground, and explain to these guys a little bit about this Fargo clay loam stuff and what it's like to work with. And, when Keith finally convinced you to get some of it on that tougher dirt, I mean, what are you seeing that has got your attention?
Well, I'm a no-till guy here, so my kind of biggest regret in my whole no-till, whatever you want to call it here, transition, I guess, is I wish I would have known about the lime before we switched to no-till, because I think it is good to get that lime worked into the ground. We do have one field that we didn't work it in at all, and then most of it we're just trying to work in with like a high-speed disc, and not go real deep so that we're tearing up what organic matter that we've built up over the years. But that is something I wish I would have known beforehand. But getting that lime worked into that ground is just like both Jim and Keith mentioned, it's aerating that soil and getting that calcium to magnesium ratio in a better ratio, and that's the first thing everybody says to me too, is I'm one of the first ones in the area right here that was started putting the lime on. They're like, why are you putting all that lime on? Well, we're after the calcium. Well, you don't need that. There's lots of calcium in the soil, which they're right. There is a lot of calcium in our soils here. The problem is there's way more magnesium in our soil. So like just from talking to Jim and listening to some of his presentations over the last couple of years and looking at our soil tests, and just figured that's something we needed to try is to get that calcium to magnesium ratio balanced out, and just free up some of the nutrients that's already in our soil.
Yeah, what Tyler's is, we run into this quite a bit, guys. Guys are no tillers, and they want to be animate about that, and we're not condemning it. We're just saying that to get that calcium activated, that injection of oxygen in there, really really makes it work that much quicker for you. And anything, poor Keith was on bended knee with Tyler trying to get him to do something. And, he finally, I think he felt sorry for Keith. So he finally decided to do something. And it doesn't take a lot, but just some induction of air is going to get that calcium kicked off, especially in tough dirt. And I mean, if you guys would be around this Fargo clay loam that these guys work with, it's tough dirt. I mean, it's as greasy as she comes. So
Yeah, you pick up a wad of this stuff, you can roll it up into a ball, and you set it on the bench. It'll be hard as a rock in the morning. So.
So Tyler, maybe just talk a little bit about that first stuff we spread for you, and it was a dry summer and how that turned out.
Yep. So we spread 3 fields up there. They're all kind of right next to each other. There's 4 fields all in a row there. We spread 3 of them. The reason I didn't spread the one is because I didn't have any problems there. I always get a good crop there. It's one of the better fields on the farm. So I thought, no need to spend any money on lime on that one. So we spread the other 3 because they were the ones we were having the issue on. And my landlord actually runs the grain cart for us all fall, and it blew my mind and blew his mind too, that fields that we spread the lime on that were our problem fields, they out-yielded supposedly our good field. They out-yielded our good field by 20 bushels an acre on spring wheat. So that was,
and how much moisture that summer did we have, maybe?
Oh, I don't know. Did we have any?
We might have had 2 inches maybe, but that would have been stretching it, I think.
Yeah, I can't recall off the top of my head, but that was in 21. That was probably the worst drought that I've seen since 88 was our last bad drought up here.
Right.
So yeah, there's and just I don't know the science behind it. Jim obviously does, but with both the lime and what actually is going on in the soil, Jim can speak better to that than I can. But both our water use efficiency and our nutrient use efficiency seems to be changing dramatically on the stuff that we've got the lime on. So yeah, it's pretty interesting to watch this happen on your dirt. It really changes things.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure you had a lot of naysayers that first year.
I still do,
questioning what you were doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's you look around the country now. Look around the country now, though, and what do you see all over the country now? You see lime piles everywhere. So.
Yeah.
Right. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
A friend of mine was, and this is too much. I don't deserve this credit. I don't. But a friend of mine that was doing some lime. Somebody was asking him how come he was doing that, and he couldn't remember why he was doing it at the time. He just said, "Well, I don't know. Tyler's doing it."
Yeah, monkey see, monkey do.
Yeah. No, I think I'd like to jump in on this, guys. At this point, the people that are listening, this is the real challenge, and see that's what's so that's growers, guys, like Tyler is. We're not condemning fertilizer. It's just a matter of what do we actually need, in order to create success. And see, this hammering on big yield has been a real disservice to the farmer. Like Tyler's saying, I've got some dirt that's not performing as well as some of the other dirt, but all of a sudden now it's performing better. So the goal now is, let's go on that good dirt and put some lime on, and maybe we can really whittle back on fertilizer and still be very competitive. And the profitability on that is going to go right through the roof. So this is really where the challenge is at. And see, the usage of the lime is the same way. Keith's got a standard that he likes guys to spread 10 ton, and he's worked with 5, and guys have just not been as happy with that. Now, he's actually done strips heavier than that have been successful, but again, it's still an economic thing. You got to pay the bill, and it seems like that seems to be a rate that the guy can justify and get that money back relatively quickly. Because see, it's a deal is how deep we need it to go to create the environment that'll withstand adversity. And see, again, with this dry weather, man, and we've saw it everywhere in the organization this year. And so I think getting this foundation built with this calcium so that you get the proper biological life in this soil to help these plants sustain themselves, under extreme adversity, it's going to be a very, very big key. And see, that's why Tyler matches up real well with us, because he did some things with fertilizer that just they don't meet what everybody's telling him. See, and he's believing his own eyes. So that makes him a very good grower's candidate right off of the get-go.
Tyler, we've got a question for you from somebody. They're asking what your average CEC is and what the calcium magnesium ratio that you're trying to get to is.
Is that for Keith, or who is that for?
Oh, sorry. That's for you, Tyler.
Oh, for me. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, I guess I don't know. Got my soil test on my desk here somewhere, I thought, but what my CEC is. But we would like to get to 8-to-1, I believe was our target, wasn't it, Jim, for calcium and magnesium?
Yeah, I would guess.
And even with 10 ton of lime on, I'm still not there yet. I mean, that's how much magnesium we've got in a lot of our soils. So.
Yeah, I would venture to say his CEC, and that, like his lighter soil, he's probably pushing up to 20, but he gets into that Fargo clay stuff, he's probably pushing 30. And like you said, to get to that 8-to-1, it's going to be it's going to take more than the 10 ton. But the thing that again, for the person asking the question, is it's still a biological factor. That thing is the chemistry of it is, that's only a guideline. What they got to do is look at how the soil's reacting. I think the testament that the no-till is working that much better for him, that's showing that he doesn't have to have that artificial induction of tillage in there to get the job done. He's trying to cut John Deere out of the equation, and see that in some cases you might be able to do that if you get the chemistry working so that the microbes are functioning correctly, because guys are using the tillage to kind of override that factor. But again, we start looking at what the price of this equipment is and fuel, that becomes problematic. So again, trying to straddle the middle again. What do I really need to get that job done? That's the big question.
Yeah, I got my test here, Jim. My CEC is 28.8.
Yeah,
on our heavier, what we call our heavier ground, I guess.
What's so just to give them guys something to chuckle at, Tyler, what's your pH on that field?
7.9.
There you go. Yeah.
He's got trace of a tie up, boys.
Yeah, I had somebody was trying to tell me that, oh, you're going to ruin your soil. You can't spread 10 ton of lime on that ground. You're going to raise your pH too high. I said, well, I spread 10 ton of lime on a field last spring that was 8.2 pH, and the soybeans ran 54 bushels. So I don't think it hurt it too bad.
Yeah.
See, Tyler, the problem is that the soybean can't read the book, so it's confused.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
Got
Yeah.
another question here. What depth in the soil are you looking for that 8-to-1 ratio? Just the top 6 inches or down deeper than that? And any of us could probably answer this one.
I mean,
my
obviously,
opinion on that
a
is,
plow.
yeah, he's got to find wherever that stress point is at. Some years 8 inches deep might solve that problem, but if he goes through a bone dry year, he might want to be like the Tritz boys that are just a little bit south and east of Tyler. They want it down there to 36 inches or 48 inches.
Yeah.
For
It
context for
depends on
this,
what.
go
I'd say
ahead.
it depends on what crops you're. It depends on what crops you're growing.
Yep.
I don't
Yep.
grow a whole lot of deep rooted crops, so me having it in the in that 6 to 8 inch range is fine. I'm not a big corn farmer. I've been in and out of corn. Maybe might like to have it a little bit deeper for corn, but like Jim was saying, it's the beet guys that want to get it down there in the ground, because those beets, they send a taproot to China. So
So for the context, like that 8-to-1 ratio is what Dr. Tegens found was where the calcium was most active. When you get less than that,
mhm.
when you get more magnesium, then like the ratio gets smaller. Then the magnesium counteracts the work of the calcium. And so that 8-to-1 ratio is pretty much how deep do you want your soil to be opened up?
And the other thing, Zach, with that too is that's a guideline. If it's 7.2 to 1, it still might get the job done. And the type of soil that you have, you got that gumbo Fargo clay loam is going to be different than something like in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, where they might be able to fuzz that a little bit, or in the Carolinas or some of the coastal sands of Georgia, they might be able to fuzz that a little bit. So again, that's what the test plot stuff is all about, guys. That's how you figure it out.
Well,
Excuse
and
Keith,
Keith,
ahead,
tell
Tyler.
these guys too on one of the things in my initial conversation with Keith was he's got a customer there, and Keith, why don't you tell the story or mention it that we put 10 ton of lime on some ground, and the phosphorus on their soil test just kept climbing every year without ever adding any more phosphorus.
Right. So then the customer went to his agronomist and said, well, how much phosphate do I have to put on to raise my phosphate this level on my soil test? Agronomist told him, he said, I have no clue, because he said, I don't understand what's going on in the first place. So yeah, because I'll just tell you, and I don't know what Tyler's tests are at right now, but in the valley, I would say most guys on the soil tests that I've seen up and down the valley, phosphate levels, yes, it shows very high on a soil test, but when you look at the parts per million, it's very low. I mean, I got guys with 8.1 pH, their phosphate levels are 2 parts per million, which is nothing. And phosphate is very expensive to buy. Obviously, everybody knows that. But I've had guys that we put a 10-ton application of lime on, and for the next 9 years, that phosphate level just keeps climbing, and they're not applying phosphate. They're just strictly using nitrogen. But that phosphate level just keeps going. And most guys that I've visited with, they'll tell me that it'll peak out somewhere between 32 and 34 parts per million, which is very high for our dirt here in the valley. And So that's just one of the benefits. And of course, nobody can explain it. And like I tell every farmer, I said, oh, that's because it's biological, releasing what you have in the soil. That's why you're seeing it. It's not because, we applied a bunch of phosphate. It's because the biological is working in your favor now. It's not working for the local co-op, selling you dry fertilizer.
It's interesting you bring that up, Keith, because I had a guy challenge me recently that applying all this calcium is going to tie phosphorus up in the soil. To see it
So
climbing.
actually the way it works is the phosphate actually keeps it from leaching. Well, the phosphate actually binds with the calcium, and yes, it does tie it, but it still makes it available to the plant. They claim that with applications of lime, that they claim that they're reducing the runoff of the phosphate and the leaching by 65%. So, yeah, no, I've had guys that 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when I drove around and spent $1 gazillion in gas in my new pickup, trying to get these guys to spread lime and trying to drum up some business, I had guys laughed at me, basically laughed me out of the yard. And it's kind of funny because I'm spreading lime for those guys now. So somewhere along the line, they decided that maybe I wasn't lying. I was telling them the truth. And I had a guy here a couple of weeks ago. He told me, he says, yeah, I remember when you come and talked to me the first time, and I thought you were crazier than hell. And he said, then I started visiting with my neighbor one night at the bar over a beer, and my neighbor's telling me what's going on in this farm. And he says, I'm scratching my head going, well, wait a minute, I'm doing everything he's doing. And he said, then the light bulb turned on one day when I drove by his field and I seen a pile of lime there. And I went, maybe there is something to that lime. So, then they call you on the phone, and then, they try to pretend that they didn't laugh at you at one point in time. Stopped and visited with them, but then they're kind of sheepish. They ask about if you would come and spread lime for them, because I want you to laugh at them and say, well, yeah, I wanted to do that years ago and you laughed at me, remember? But yeah, I was talking to a customer 2 weeks ago, and he was kind of chuckling about that. He said, yeah. He said, and your story hasn't changed a bit, he said. He said, well, there's only one story, and that's the truth. So
there you go.
So it is interesting, but I mean, the problem is the establishment, like I tell everybody that says, well, how come we didn't know about this 20 years ago? And I said, well, there's no limestone quarry that has millions of dollars to throw to some land grant university to promote their product, like Monsanto and Bayer, and that's where the problem lies. I mean, it's everything is derivative from money. That's and like I tell guys, which travels faster, bad news or good news? So, and it's always been bad news travels a lot faster than good news, unfortunately.
Mhm. All right, thank you, Keith and Tyler. Are there any questions for either of them?
Just one more comment I want to make. So if they want to do the bucket test, basically put 6 inches of dirt in a 5-gallon pail out of your field. Don't use potting soil, obviously. I mean, you want to see what's going on in your field. You need to go out there with a shovel and put some dirt in there. But fill 3 buckets up, and you put a half a pound of limestone in one of them, 1/4 pound in another one, and nothing in the third one, and then just germinate some soybeans or some corn or wheat, whatever you want to do. You'll be amazed at the difference in the growth of the plant and obviously in the root production of it. But that'll give you a really good indication of what you have out there. So 1/4 pound in 6 inches of dirt in a 5-gallon pail be equivalent to a 5-ton rate, and a half a pound in 6 inches of dirt in a 5-gallon bucket is equivalent to a 10-ton rate. So, I mean, if you want to just do a little experiment just to see what would happen if you did put on 10 ton of lime, that's the most cheapest and efficient way to get an idea what would happen. So just something to think about if you're bored one day and you want to do a little experiment. That's a pretty good test.
Thank you, Keith and Tyler. and Jim. Thank you guys, all guys, very much. Our next, just a second, our next call is in November 9th. That'll be at 9 p.m. Eastern time again. Thank you everybody for listening in, and have a good night.